My brother's voice cut through the courtroom like a blade. She never served. She's a fraud. Stolen valor. The family behind him nodded, as if my existence had always been a mistake. I sat frozen, not because I was weak, but because I'd heard this tone my entire life. Mocking, dismissive, certain I was nothing. That day, I realized the truth. To them, I was invisible. But the world they didn't know, the world I had bled for, was about to step into the light. My name is Corvina Harlow, and this is the day my brother tried to erase me, until the judge's command changed everything. The air inside the small Santa Fe courtroom was heavy, thick with the faint tang of polished oak and the hum of fluorescent lights. Every bench was filled, my family crammed shoulder to shoulder in the gallery, their whispers low but sharp enough to cut. At the front, Ethan leaned into the witness stand, his voice swelling with false conviction. She's a pretender. She never served a day in her life. All this talk about military service, just a ploy to steal what belongs to me. He spoke with the kind of theatrical certainty that had always made people believe him, his words echoing against the paneled walls like a verdict already cast. Behind him, our relatives nodded, some with smug little smirks, others whispering to one another as though they were spectators at a play they'd seen before. Their faces carried the same expression I had grown up with, dismissal dressed as certainty. A few even chuckled under their breath, as if my humiliation were entertainment. I sat perfectly still at the counsel table, fingers folded neatly in my lap, eyes fixed not on Ethan, but on Daniel Ruiz beside me. He didn't flinch or take notes. His hand rested calmly on a sealed red envelope, the wax glinting faintly under the harsh lights. It was waiting, just like I was. The judge leaned forward, his brow furrowed, his posture tilting ever so slightly toward Ethan's side. For a moment, it seemed the weight of the family's chorus might sway him, but then his gaze shifted. He looked at me, truly looked, and paused. My silence wasn't resignation. It was composure, deliberate and unyielding. And in that stillness, a tremor of doubt flickered across the judge's face. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but enough to shift the balance. Ethan thought he was winning. What he couldn't see was that the ground beneath him had already begun to crack. The church smelled overwhelmingly of lilies, the kind of sweetness that clung to your lungs and made grief feel heavier. Light filtered weakly through the stained glass windows, dim and muted, as if even the sun knew better than to intrude. Ethan stood at the center of it all, shaking hands, murmuring condolences with the ease of a man who believed himself the rightful heir to every room he walked into. He was the host, the star, while I lingered at the margins, more shadow than daughter. When a retired Navy officer approached me, his expression kind, his voice low with genuine sympathy, for a moment I felt seen. But before I could answer his simple question, Ethan swept in, draping an arm across my shoulders with a smirk that was almost theatrical. "Don't mind my sister," he chuckled, loud enough for the pews behind us to hear. "She's great at pushing paper clips, but the most dangerous thing she's ever faced is a paper cut." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Not loud, but sharp enough. The officer hesitated, his gaze flicking between Ethan's grin and my forced smile, then dropped away. I held my composure, offered a brittle laugh, and said nothing. Silence was my armor, though it did nothing to blunt the sting. In that moment, the truth settled deep in my chest. Ethan's disdain wasn't confined to the dinner table or whispered family jabs. He wanted me erased in front of everyone, stripped of even the faintest dignity. It wasn't just about family pride anymore. It was about erasing my worth from the world's memory. And that wound, I knew, would never fully heal. Memories pressed in as if summoned by that humiliation. Nights at our family table came rushing back, where every meal became a celebration of Ethan's triumphs. A new deal closed, another investor charmed, champagne corks echoing like gunfire. I once dared to share my own small victory, a commendation from work, and my mother brushed it aside with a pat on the hand. her voice syrupy with dismissal. That's nice, dear. Like Employee of the Month. The laughter that followed still burned. While they painted me as a dropout, a librarian, wasting her life on meaningless desk work in Washington, my real world existed in a windowless SIF, cold concrete, the hum of servers, the glow of monitors where lives balanced on the edge of my decisions. I wasn't pushing papers. I was Echo 9, a naval intelligence officer directing operations across oceans. In Somalia, my judgment shifted the path of a mission, saving a young Marine whose name I never learned. In Syria, my call sealed off a network before it reached American soil. My family would never know those moments. They had no idea that in my silence I carried lives, and that silence wasn't weakness, it was duty. Before he died, my father left behind a final gesture. His will divided things evenly, but in his own handwriting, he added one sentence. I wish to acknowledge my daughter Corvina's quiet service to her country. To most, it might have seemed a vague kindness, barely worth notice. But to Ethan, it was a fracture in the story he had crafted for all of us, that he was the only star, and I, the shadow. That single sentence struck at the heart of his pride, and he would do anything to erase it. That was the moment, though none of us realized it then, when Ethan decided to drag me into court and try to strip away not just an inheritance, but my very dignity. The letter arrived on a gray afternoon, its official seal pressed deep into the paper. My hand trembled as I tore it open and scanned the words. Ethan had filed to contest the will, accusing me of deceiving our father with fabricated stories about military service. For a heartbeat, my fingers went numb, the paper slick with the sweat of my grip. Then the trembling stopped. My pulse steadied. The chill that replaced it was sharper than steel. This wasn't a squabble over Sunday dinner anymore. This was war, and it had moved to the courthouse. I sat in a Santa Fe law office, the desert sun slanting through the blinds, across from Daniel Ruiz, once a JAG, now a private attorney. His voice carried no alarm as he skimmed the filing. He's taken it public, Daniel said, setting the papers down with deliberate calm. That means we don't meet him with outrage or sentiment. We meet him on the record, with strategy. If he wants to play this in the open, we'll let him, but not by his rules. Ethan didn't just want money. He wanted to erase any trace that I might have mattered, to preserve his place as the golden sun untouched by shadows. And my mother, never subtle, proved it by calling that night. Her words were soft, but the barb was sharp. Don't drag this out, Corvina. You won't win. Let Ethan handle it. That betrayal landed harder than the summons itself. For years I'd been taught my silence meant weakness, but staring at that lawsuit, I saw it differently. Silence was cover, strategy. This wasn't just a case anymore. It was a mission, and I would run it the same way I had run operations overseas, with patience, precision, and an endgame that would leave nothing standing. The room in Albuquerque was bare, just a desk, 2 chairs, and the hum of a tired ceiling fan. On the desk sat a red-sealed envelope, its wax glinting faintly under the dim light. Daniel tapped it once with his finger, his eyes steady on mine. This, he said, isn't standard procedure. It's from the Office of Naval Intelligence. It doesn't explain what you did, but it affirms your service in a classified capacity. Only the presiding judge is authorized to see it. It's the kind of document that shifts the ground beneath a courtroom. I listened, the weight of it pressing heavier than any file I'd handled in the skiff. I remembered long nights with screens glowing, voices on comms waiting for my decision, moments where hesitation meant lives lost. Now, the battlefield was here, and the life on the line was my own. Daniel's tone sharpened. This is a tactical nuke. Once it's opened, there's no going back. Ethan won't just lose. He'll attract federal attention. He won't see it coming until it hits. My response came without hesitation, each word steady. He walked himself into this. I'll just flip the switch. The plan wasn't about persuading the court of my innocence with pretty speeches. It was about forcing Ethan to swear under oath that I had fabricated my service, feeding his arrogance until the trap snapped shut. Then, at the moment of his greatest confidence, we'd detonate the envelope, but the risk was real. If the plan faltered, not only would I lose the inheritance, I could expose fragments of a life designed to remain invisible. That danger stretched far beyond me. It could ripple into operations that had never existed on paper. I breathed in, steady and controlled. The choice was made. I wasn't doing this for money or for property. I was doing it to sever a toxic story once and for all, to end the lie my family had written about me. The courtroom would be the final battlefield, and I intended to walk out whole. The motel room was dim, its single lamp casting a weak yellow glow over papers scattered across the table. The air smelled faintly of old carpet and desert dust. I sat alone, sleepless, my hands tracing the edges of depositions and affidavits as if the weight of them could anchor me. Memories broke through the silence, sharp and uninvited. I saw my family's dining room, lit bright with laughter, my parents popping champagne to celebrate Ethan closing another deal. I had tried, once, to speak. My own recognition at work, something that had taken years of grinding to achieve. My mother had smiled thinly and murmured, "Employee of the month, huh?" The room laughed, and I shrank back into myself. I remembered nights working 2 dead-end jobs to save for a new laptop after mine broke, while my parents diverted money meant for my education into Ethan's investments. They never hid it. They didn't have to. Then another memory crashed in, vivid and brutal. Somalia. A mission balanced on seconds, signals flickering across my screen, the desperate voice of a young Marine on comms. My call had saved him, had shifted the entire operation. That night I wasn't invisible. I was trusted with lives. The contrast hollowed me. 2 lives. One where I was a punchline at home, another where I was Echo 9, where my judgment carried weight beyond borders. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, shattering the reflection. A text from an unknown number. "The courtroom isn't a place for pretenders. Tomorrow, you'll be exposed." For a moment I stared at it, waiting for fear to rise. But nothing came. Only calm, tomorrow. The facade my family worshipped would crack. Their lies would burn under the same fluorescent lights Ethan thought would crown him. By morning, the courtroom was packed, the air thick with sweat and murmurs. Every seat was filled. My relatives lined up behind Ethan like a fortress, their faces set in judgment. Ethan strode to the stand, his voice booming with manufactured sorrow. "She lied to our dying father. Stolen valor. Plain and simple." He let each word hang, heavy, deliberate, like blades meant to slice me apart in front of everyone. The gallery responded with soft claps, approving nods, a chorus of disdainful whispers. A few shook their heads at me as though I were already guilty. I sat motionless, eyes cold, breathing even. Then Daniel Ruiz rose. His tone carried none of Ethan's theatrics. Steady, precise, surgical. "Your Honor, we have a document for in-camera review." He placed the sealed red envelope onto the clerk's desk, its wax glinting beneath the sterile lights. The judge sighed, weary at first, then broke the seal with a thumb. He read the first line, and everything shifted. His expression drained from boredom to shock, then hardened into alarm. He snapped upright, his voice sharp and commanding. "Officers, seal this court, immediately!" The doors slammed, locks clanged into place, echoing like gunfire. The gallery jolted. My mother clutched her chest, swaying as if she might collapse. Ethan froze, mouth half open, his arrogance stripped bare. The judge's gaze cut into him, voice low and edged with steel. "You have made sworn statements about a protected naval intelligence officer. These accusations may constitute an attempt to expose classified information. You are to remain silent until a federal inquiry is complete." The blood drained from Ethan's face, sweat beaded at his hairline. For once, words failed him. He had come to destroy me with a performance. Instead, he was the one cornered, exposed, and under investigation before the very audience he'd tried to impress. The courtroom held its breath. The silence pressed tight against the walls after the doors had been locked. The judge's voice broke it, firm and unyielding. The will of Mr. Harlow stands. His note acknowledging his daughter's service is legally valid. The accusations made by the respondent may be subject to federal review. Ethan, who only hours ago had strutted with certainty, sat paralyzed. His face was drained of color, his jaw slack. The smirk that had always followed him like a shadow was gone. My mother lurched to her feet, her voice shrill with desperation. "No, this is a trick. My son can't be wrong." Security stepped in quickly, steadying her as she struggled against the reality closing in. "To U.S." Marshals moved with quiet authority, their hands firm on Ethan's shoulders as they pulled him from his chair. His tie hung crooked, sweat staining the collar of his suit. For the first time, his eyes sought mine, not with contempt, but with raw pleading. "Help me!" His gaze seemed to beg. "Fix this!" I didn't flinch. I didn't soften. I turned away, rising slowly, the sound of my heels striking the tile echoing like a gavel. The reversal was complete. For the first time, I wasn't the one humiliated. I was the one walking out on my own terms, leaving Ethan to drown in the silence he had created. Part 6, Chapter 9. The Quiet Honor, 6 months later. The room couldn't have been further from the suffocating courtroom in Santa Fe. At the Norfolk Naval Base, the hall was small, almost austere. Flags were folded neatly on stands, their presence solemn but steady. The yellow light from overhead lamps cast a warm glow on the faces gathered, men and women who had stood in the shadows of history, carrying burdens no one outside these walls would ever know. I stood at attention in full uniform, the weight of silence settling like a second skin. In front of me, a senior officer approached with a small case. He opened it without ceremony, lifted the medal, and fastened the Naval Intelligence Distinguished Service Medal to my chest. There were no cameras flashing, no applause ringing out. Instead, hands extended, rough, steady, calloused, gripped mine with quiet respect. Eyes met mine, not with pity or skepticism, but with understanding. They knew what silence cost. They knew what it meant to serve unseen. I allowed myself a small smile, one that reached deeper than any victory in court ever could. In this room, I was not invisible. I was one of them. This was my family, bound not by blood, but by trust and sacrifice. And in that moment, I understood. My true victory had never been about land, money, or a line in a will. The real triumph was here, in the unspoken recognition shared between people who shaped the course of nations without ever seeking the spotlight. This was the only acknowledgement I had ever needed. The office in Washington was quiet, its walls humming with the faint buzz of servers. The only light came from the large screen in front of me, glowing in shades of green and blue, a satellite map of a region where the next operation was already in motion. The cold glow washed across my face, sharper and more honest than the sunlight outside could ever be. My phone buzzed once against the desk. I glanced down. A new message. My mother's number still saved, though I hadn't answered in months. Her words were short, familiar, dripping with the same entitlement I'd grown up under. "Ethan is drowning in legal fees. He'll lose everything. He's still your brother, your blood. You have to help him. Do something." I read it once, then again. Not because I didn't understand, but because I wanted to feel something. Anger, betrayal, sorrow. Nothing came. The ache I used to carry had hollowed out long ago, leaving only stillness. Their voices no longer had power over me. With a steady thumb, I deleted the message. A second later, I blocked the number. The silence that followed was almost cleansing. For the first time, I wasn't weighed down by guilt or the old compulsion to fix what had never been mine to fix. I lifted my gaze back to the screen, the map blinking with coordinates, lines of encrypted data scrolling down the side. This was my world now, real, immediate, consequential. Lives depended on these pixels, on choices I would make before dawn. My whisper filled the room, meant only for myself. My legacy was never a ranch in New Mexico or a line in a will. My legacy is my name, spoken with respect in rooms where the fate of nations is decided. I leaned back, breathing in the quiet, a faint smile curling at the corner of my mouth. The war with my family was over, but my work, my purpose, those were just beginning. In the hush of that small office, I was no longer a daughter dismissed or a sister erased. I was Corvina Harlow, Echo 9, and for the first time, the story was mine alone to tell.